We need to talk about the conflict in Ukraine. It is drastically reshaping the speed and direction of innovation in the defense and security sectors. And we brought to you 4 amazing panelists. This is our largest panel of the event to talk about this. And then the panel is moderated by John Thornhill of the Financial Times and Sifted. But first up is Eveline Buchatskiy, Managing Partner at D3, followed by Rich Drake, General Manager of Anduril, UK, Jaanus Tamm, CEO, founder of Defsecintel Solutions, and Viktoriia Yaremchuk, CEO and co-founder of Farsight Vision. And of course, it's moderated by John Thornhill. Give him a round of applause and bring him on out.
Well, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be at this remarkable conference today and to moderate this panel on what we can learn from Ukraine and the pace of innovation. We don't have that much time, so I'm going to get straight on with it, and I'm going to start with Viktoriia. You're the founder and CEO of a Ukrainian defense tech company, Farsight Vision. I think Ukraine has shown extraordinary courage and ingenuity and resilience in defying the Russian invasion of 2022. What have you learned at Farsight Vision over the past 2.5 years, and what do you think the people in this room should learn from the experience of Ukraine?
So I guess first of all, we are even younger than 2.5 years. We actually shaped up as a company a little bit more than a year ago. Before that, there were a lot of volunteering projects, and that's one of the things that I can share with everyone. Ukraine is very strong about the horizontal ties, as we call that, the level of support from bottom to top up, and the small initiatives creating here and there on demand on missions to help to defend against the invasion, against the enemy. And it's amazing how fast with the level of the horizontal ties tied inside the community and also outside of Ukraine with all the talents that are involved to help. We were able to make the pace ways faster in improving and helping with our ideas on the front line, in the battlefield. And it was completely unexpected, I guess, that, and it's about not only about Ukraine, it's about the rest of the world as well, that we were not prepared for some of the challenges that we will have to face. Some of the challenges that are well known now, like operating in GPS-denied environment, for example, on the battlefront, the issues we have with electromagnetic warfare, etc., etc., and how the existing solutions that were used for various reasons in various parts of the world, they just don't work. And we had to come up quick with whatever we could come up, and how fast the ecosystem grew in Ukraine around these challenges. So we are on the intelligence and navigation side at Farsight Vision. We are working mostly enabling the basically geolocalization, analytics, etc. in GPS-denied environment on the battlefront. But there are a lot of companies, and I think there are some here in the audience as well, that are part of this ecosystem and that are helping to battle these challenges and help us prevail on the front line. Outside of the front line as well, to be able to basically move fast in the situation where every 3 to 6 months the battlefront situation changes dramatically. So we are definitely way far from the possibility to plan, 3-5 years in advance. We don't have years, we barely have months. And that is definitely something that we have already learned, and we have some, I think, very strong mechanisms and instruments to work on.
I mean, it's extraordinarily hard to run a startup at any time. Is it perversely easier in wartime because people have a sense of urgency that you just have to get on because the situation is so critical?
No, not really. Well, basically we have even more challenges because we have to have the possibility to deliver quick in the war of state situation, and apart from that, we have to be able to know that our military are working per protocols, right? And there are various regulations, state regulations, and agencies or regulations, etc., that we have to abide by, but at the same time the loop of change, the loop of delivery is way shorter. So this is a huge challenge for us, of course. And then, of course, the import-export situation, especially for the import, where we are mostly on the software side of things, but we also work with hardware and we are integrated with hardware. So we are the situation with the possibility to import in Ukraine for the production manufacturing is one of our challenges as well. The access to resources, to talents, etc. Because obviously in our case we have to work on very specific talent pool and very specific technologies. That's another challenge. And then obviously the environment in which we are operating, because on the one hand, we are not dealing with the typical military end users, right? Because the initially Ukrainian army was pretty small and it grew exponentially over the last 2.5 years. And so a lot of military are actually our former colleagues and friends from various other spheres of life. So one of my backgrounds is in software engineering, and there are a lot of my former friends, colleagues out there in the battlefronts, and that changes the dynamics of the relationship with them.
Okay, Eveline, I'm going to come to you now. You're an investor, you run a defense tech fund. How do you invest to promote innovation? We hear a lot from investors about the need for kind of dual-use investing. You have to invest in companies that have both a civilian purpose and a military purpose. But you don't do that, do you? You invest solely in the military. Can you tell us how you can make it commercially viable, though, from investing purely in defense tech?
War. I mean, there's war, so the demand is extremely high. And yes, we are focused entirely on defense military use case because we want the startups we invest in to focus. That's what you expect from a successful company, to have focus. And with such large demand and such urgency, we want them to focus on the military use case, which is our specialty. So, I mean, how do you find commercial viability? There is a whole new class of defense entrepreneurs now. The procurement cycles have been shortened dramatically. I mean, there's war, so you need to deliver everything in a matter of months, not years. The design iteration cycles have shortened to weeks. Typically in Ukraine, you deliver a product to a brigade one day, a week later, you know exactly how it performed, and you fixed everything that, all the feedback you received, you act on it. So it's a completely different world right now. And then you go on to sign multi-million-dollar contracts. Whereas in the past, these startups would have to go through multiple layers of subcontractors to get to a prime, to get to an actual contract, and that would take years, and they would live out of grants and all kinds of subsidies until they made it sustainable. Right now, a startup can easily get to a multi-million-dollar contract within months. And I have several examples of that in my portfolio. So it's very commercially viable. Right.
And you invested, I think I'm right in saying, 14 companies. Could you just give us a taste of what kind of companies you're investing in and why?
Yes. So D3 has one very simple mandate. We need to win the war in Ukraine for Ukraine. So it's a very simple mandate. How do you do that? You find the most talented people to work on the Ukrainian Armed Forces pain points. And we invested in 14 companies in 14 months. So that's one startup a month that we invest in. And we have very much the pulse of what's needed from the military. We talk to them on a daily basis. So they come to us with specific needs, specific asks, and we go after talent from across the globe to meet those specific needs, and that turns into a startup. And sometimes we also have call to action when we see that one need is not being met, and I can list a few of the needs that are not being met right now. We go out to various places where they have concentration of talent, and we say, can you work on this? And out of such call to action, sometimes companies are born and contracts are signed. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Jaanus, I'm going to come to you. You're from Estonia, but you're active in Ukraine. Can you tell us what Defsecintel does? And one of the issues that both Viktoriia and Eveline have been talking about is these incredibly fast feedback loops when you're innovating in a wartime situation. Can you address that in particular as well?
We are a Estonian company, and when the war started, then we started to think how we can contribute, how we can help them win. And we started to deliver their different surveillance and targeting systems. And quite soon we realized that, I would say like next day, that you have to be there. You have to be in Ukraine, otherwise you can't help them, and otherwise your product doesn't fit. So it may fit when you arrive there, it may fit first 2 weeks, but then quite soon something happens which you never thought about. Because war is very dynamic. Some things changing with 2-4 weeks. Capabilities are created within 3-4 months. And if you're not there, then you will not be part of the very short feedback cycle, which help you to modify the products. We have actually changed our product a lot based on the feedback from the front, and we actually have created 2 new products based on that. So, which actually can be used also in NATO countries, but right now we are focused on Ukraine. And now, for example, we also have a system for helping them to detect Shahed drones and take them down. But it's very important to be there, to be part of the very fast feedback loop. And also, what I have recommended to Estonian engineers, I'm sometimes sending them there to feel it. You have to feel eelarvet, because otherwise you don't understand what does it mean. And lots of European engineers, when they develop something, they think that you're sitting here, you take your ultra cool pen, you draw something, you buttons, No, you are in the trench. Your fingers are frozen. How you press a button there? You need big red button. There are sound like bombs, falling, the artillery sounds. It's how do you use your system then? And all these things you only feel when you are there, and then you build the product which actually fit, and then you can scale. Like a colleague said here, if it fits, if the soldiers say yes, we want them 10,000, and then the contract will come.
And how does that work? How do you get that feedback?
We have locals. We have Ukrainians in our team. We have grown 30 engineers there, different from mechanics till project managers. Of course, they are not allowed to be always in the front line, but when the end user is using it, they give the feedback, they ask a question. Sometimes you realize the training was something wrong. Sometimes you realize Russian is doing some countermeasures. Based on that, you collect the feedback. Sometimes they bring the system to maintenance during that period, which is changing something on the way, basically. There is no time to do 5-6 committees for the requirements, reviews, and all this kind of things. No, you need the device must be going out after 3 days. So, and you do it, lots of things on the way. And of course, you can't do this kind of like changes like in 10,000 devices at the same time, but you can make small changes, and then you must be able to scale very fast. So like Ukraine is doing also right now exactly with drones. You're building one version, they test it 2 weeks, it works, then they build 5,000 of them. Then they destroy lots of Russian equipment with that, then Russians learning, and then they need to build another one. They test it 2 weeks and they build another 10,000. But you understand the development, the manufacturing cycle is absolutely different. You don't have time to develop 3 years, then build your factories 2 years, and then build your warehouse full of warehouses like 5 years. You have to do it everything in 4 months, and you do it 3 times from scratch.
Okay, Rich, you worked at a defence prime for 20 years, where I imagine the feedback loops are not quite as fast as we've just been hearing on this panel. But you're now working at Anduril Industries, which is an extraordinary US startup in this area, which promises, according to your website, quantum leaps in capability. So what has your company learned from the Ukrainian war or the war in Ukraine, and how are you going to achieve those leaps in capability?
Well, like my colleague here has said, it is all about the compressed development cycle and the importance of end user feedback in that cycle. You know, moving from designing and manufacturing exquisite equipment over a number of years, where I started and ended my career on the same product, moving to an war environment now where the outside, the hardware of the product may look the same, but the software internals may be changing on a 3-weekly or 6-weekly basis. That's what we're learning. We're learning it's important to keep the network of feedback really close to you and be more than prepared to admit the first thing you made is not any good and you move quickly to the next.
Okay, Eveline?
I just, on the feedback question, for the startups in the audience here, so Ukraine has fine-tuned this. The ways to get feedback. First of all, even around Kyiv alone, there are several testing grounds that are fully equipped for any startup to test their equipment under the harsh conditions. They're called polygons, and they're free, by the way. You just need to book. Second, the government has a new program called Next. You give your technology, they make sure it gets distributed to the right people to give you the feedback. Third, charities play a big role in the war in Ukraine. Essentially, for the first year of war, I could probably say all the drones supplied to the front line practically were purchased by charities. So they have very strong relationships with all the brigades, and they do that testing for you as well. And fourth, every brigade has a testing person that if you establish a relationship with that person, you can have the feedback directly to you from the brigades.
Rich, I'd like to come back to you on that point because, I mean, Eveline is talking about the kind of purchasing pull, as it were, in Ukraine. In the US, clearly there's a massively different structure. You have the biggest customer of first resort in the world, placing very big orders with Anduril for drone technology and so on. How does it work in Europe? Everyone talks about this very fragmented purchasing system. Do you see big orders coming through? Can you envisage a world in where there is more centralized purchasing, which would help the innovation cycle accelerate?
I think what part of the answer to that question is political, which I'm not necessarily qualified to give you an answer for. I think that the day of the very large order may be leaving us anyway, for all the reasons we're talking here. Why would you order so much that essentially makes you obsolete? The contracting mechanisms should change, and I believe will change. Whether that's through contracting for a capability, rather than contracting for an item. Actually, I need to deliver this effect, so therefore we should contract for this effect. And then that allows, alongside open architectures, allows anybody to come in as the world changes around us so quickly. I think that's important.
For example, you can buy a drone frame, but you don't have to buy the radio or the camera because 6 months later it's already different. And for the supply chain, I think one thing what have changed is that good enough is good enough. So it used to be so that when you deliver to military, it has to be military standard. It takes lots of time to certificate and all these kind of things. Ukraine war has also showed that commercially also self-components you can put together very fast, good enough things which serve the purpose to kill enemy. So it doesn't have to be $2 million, very precise rocket. You can do it also with €500 FPV drones if you build it purposely and you have the supply chain there. And it's not military supply chain.
As you're describing, there is clearly an arms race between Ukraine and Russia to out-innovate each other, and Russia is obviously devoting enormous resources to this and directing state purchasing power in a very specific way. But Viktoriia, can you tell us how do you think it is possible for Ukraine to out-innovate Russia?
Well, I think we are out-innovating in certain fields, and there is this competition going on all the time. So I just wanted to briefly add to what the colleagues were saying about the procurement cycles, etc. Especially in the field where the main product of the core of a product would be software, there is a huge challenge in Ukraine, and I think in other countries, like in the EU countries as well, in procurement of the software products as compared to the hardware products, because there are legislation in place is just not fitting anymore, and it should change, because again, you cannot just license a yearly license for a software and just keep it as is for a year, because you cannot, you do some updates, but it requires a lot of regulations anyway to process these updates. But as was mentioned before, and I cannot mention the names or the companies, etc. But we are engaged as well as partners and collaborators in constant analysis of what's being done on the enemy side, so that we know basically what countermeasures we are working in. But in parallel to that, the innovation cycles are so short, so they can be, as Eveline said, a week cycle, but sometimes even shorter when we have a need or we have an idea that we want to test. Then I think we are definitely, we definitely have certain tracks, both in relation to computer vision, AI, navigation, electromagnetic warfare, where we are basically out inventing and we are leading in some of those directions. But definitely we can see the cycles of 2 to 4 to 6 months where there are countermeasures on the enemy side as well, and there are not innovations, I would say copy-pastings happening in certain way on the enemy side.
Eveline, do you want to come in on this at all? How do you assess the Ukrainian ability to innovate relative to the Russian?
The Russians are always copying Ukraine. There's perhaps one area where they are a little bit ahead, which is EW. But for drones and everything else, they're essentially copying, but they copy very fast, I have to say. What's missing on the Ukrainian side is couple that ingenuity and innovation with capital and scalability. So we need to be first, which we are, but then scale fast enough that the element of surprise will be very impactful to the enemy. Because what I tell people all the time is, remember the Soviet Union. It looked really good until it didn't. So it may look scary, but trust me, the other side is falling apart. It's a sandcastle. If you have the element of surprise with scalability, it will disintegrate. And that's what we need. We need capital for the companies to set up production and bring innovation in mass to the front line.
As a former Moscow correspondent for the Financial Times, I would just certainly echo that. You can't predict the past in Russia, let alone the future, but something is going to change quite quickly, I think. Rich, on an earlier panel, people were talking about governments are slow for a reason. We're talking about kind of life and death technology. It's absolutely essential for governments to take into consideration all of the safety factors and the criticality of these systems that they're developing. How strong an influence is that, do you think, in Ukraine and more generally in the kind of purchasing ministries at the moment? Or is that mentality changing as well very fast?
Well, I think the mentality is changing dependent on geography. I don't necessarily think that some parts of Western Europe are thinking they're in a war state and therefore treating life as a war state, which means their risk appetite is different. As manufacturers of equipment or software, we need to make sure our equipment is fundamentally safe, but to what level and what degree? And I'm talking to my colleagues before we came on, the level of risk appetite right now in Ukraine needs to be lower. And that encourages speed of innovation and change.
Right. Okay. Viktoriia, I want to give you the last word. What would you like the audience here to take away from this discussion? What is the one thing that the outside world needs to know about Ukraine?
I think Ukraine has definitely already proven the possibility and the extreme, outburst of talent in the face of the immediate, not danger, it's actually in the face of death, and in the face of protecting the human and the democratic values that we all share here. So it's important to not to be silent, I guess, about this danger that you are viewing in real time on the TV and in the internet, etc. And to actually try your hand in participating in order to defend these values now, not later, because we don't know how the later unwinds and in which countries of the world. So if you want to help, please do that faster. Do that now. Share the possibility to scale, as Eveline said, these initiatives, these ideas that are being developed and that are innovated in the front line. If you're on the startup side, collaborate. We are very strong in horizontal ties. Come approach startup community, Ukrainian Investors Fund community. We are very much into collaboration. Spread the word of truth, which is very important in the current timing, and just try to be on the defense and the resilience side together with us, and that would be very important for the collective resilience of Europe and of the world.
Well, resilience is clearly the watchword of the day, so thank you very much to all of my panel for a great discussion.